Gute Woche. We'll start the Shir, and welcome to you all for joining us. I hope you can hear me. Can you raise your hand if you can hear me? Good, and can you see the screen also? The shared screen. Wonderful. Okay. Right. So let's start with the first thing on our agenda. Someone sent me this picture of he lives in Eretz Yisrael, one of the people who join our Shir regularly from Eretz Yisrael, and his son gave his tefillin to a sofer to check, and the sofer did the Kesher, as you see it over here, and he's asking, where does that come from, and is it any question about it? The sofer said that's how the Rebbe's Kesher was. So what I have at the side here and the other two pictures are from my own tefillin, and as you see where it comes over here, there's only one circuit on both of these, whereas over here in the picture which is he sent me, there's two circuits over here. So actually I told him I don't see any. Generally I'm quite careful. I don't like to answer shilas about sofras. It's a very specialized field. I don't see any question, any hesitation halacha about it. But meanwhile, today I actually spoke with one of the sofrim here, my good friend Rebbe and he said he had some observations about this. So I think I'm going to keep shtum until I get greater clarity on this. But in other words, there's different ways of making the kesher. What I also would like to point out is that there's different ways of the right strap, which is what I'm pointing to over here. So there's one way that it's exposed at the back of the kesher, which makes it easier if you want to adjust the tefillin, the size of the strap. Here we have how the diagonal is blocking, which makes it harder to adjust the girth of the strap. Mr. Brewer seems to be a little bit unhappy about making it accessible this way, but Meir Zirkin, whose father was a sofer in Crown Heights, Laser Zirkin Olav Shalom, he tells me that by the Rebbe he did have the strap in this way that makes it easier to adjust. Okay. But let's not get into that. As I said, I'd like to leave that for once I get greater clarity from Rabbi Tiefenbrunn. And meanwhile, I want to share with you something which is not on the agenda. And that is, we say in benching, when we bench, we say, on the weekdays, we say Al Na'ares Bavel. On Shabbos, or other times when we don't say Tachanun, we say Shir HaMalos. Really, they're both serving the same purpose. That we have when we're going to we've eaten and we're happy that we're satisfied, so we want to remember Yerushalayim, and so Al Na'ares Bovel is remembering Yerushalayim, and Shir HaMalos B'Shuv Hashem Shivas Tzion is remembering Yerushalayim. The only difference is one is in a way of joy, and the other one is a way of mourning, of grief. So they are both serving the same purpose. So in a day when there's a day of joy, we say Shir HaMalos. When it's a day where it's not such no special cause for simcha, so we say Al Na'ares Bavel. Fine. But then in the Chabad Siddur, and this is also from the Arizal, in Siddur Arizal or various sources, to say Lav Natser Ben Ginois Mizmor Shir. When we say Shir HaMalos, we also say Lipnei Koirach. When we say Al Na'ares Bavel, we say also Lam Natser Ben Ginois Mizmor Shir. And I've been searching to find why is it that we're saying that chapter of Lam Natser Ben Ginois Mizmor Shir. We are familiar that Lam Natser Ben Ginois Mizmor Shir is said alongside with the Sfira So'emer. And Lam Natser Ben Ginois Mizmor Shir take off the first 5 words, the rest of the chapter has got 49 words, and we kind of emphasize one of those words for each night of Sfiras Omer. It's called Mizmer HaMenorah, or Shir HaMenorah. That this chapter, Samach Zayin in Tilim, is associated particularly with the menorah. Incidentally, that is actually the Shir Tilim, which on Yom Yud Beis, so it's the Shir Tilim of today. And I saw in Sforim that in addition to the fact it has 49 words, looking at the menorah itself, the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, as it's described in such detail in Parshas Truma, had 49 features. So listen carefully. Each of the branches has got 3 cups, plus another one down near the bottom of the menorah. So that means 22 cups. Then there were 9 balls, 9 round balls, and then there are 11 blossoms. So let's count that up. Sorry. So again, sorry. There's 11 balls, because where the branches meet together, they are those balls, the kaftorim. So there are 11 kaftorim. There are 9 prochim. So 9 and 11 equals 20. Plus the 22 cups. So 20 and 22 equals 42. Plus the 7 branches. So you have, in all, you have 49 details of the menorah. So again, the menorah has the number 49 kind of built in. And this mizmer has got 49 words. This is all very beautiful, but what's that got to do with saying, it where before we bench? So that was really what was bothering me. So why we say this in association with Sfiras Omer, good. And for those who dabble a little bit in Kabbalah, you may know that Shem Mab, Membeis, has got to do with elevation. So we have many times we say Oni B'choyach. Oni B'choyach we say by Karbonis, and we say it by Kabbalah Shabbos. When there's a moment by Krishim Shalamita, when there's a moment of elevation, we say Membeis. We also say Oni B'choyach, we say it by at Sfiras Omer. But there somehow it becomes Memtes. So back to our question: why are we saying this chapter of Lamnasech ben Gidon Mizmer Shir, Lamnasech ben Gidon Mizmer David? Was it? Lamnasech ben Gidon Mizmer Shir. Sorry, yeah. You see at the top it says Lamnasech ben Gidon Mizmer Shir. So in Chassidishe Sidurim, this is very, very standard. In Ashkenazi Sidurim, it's not so common. But there is this idea of saying this mizmer and having in mind the union of the menorah. So, as I say, I'm looking for explanation. And so I'm now going back. Okay, let's go back. Yeah. So this came to mind today, and I'm really if someone has a better explanation, I'm very happy to hear. We have, when it goes to the details of the building of the Mishkan, so it has here v'samtos hashulchan michutz lapareches. The table in the Mishkan should be outside of the curtain before the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Vas hamenorah neichach hashulchan al tzela Mishkan timon. The menorah is on the south side, opposite the shulchan. V'hashulchan titin al tzela sofen. The posuk is like really a bit of a puzzle. Why is it so long-winded? It could have said the shulchan should be on the north side and the menorah should be on the south side opposite the shulchan. It could have saved another 4 or 5 words. So there seems to be something about the menorah radiating light to the table. And so this is my conjecture. That you have a table and you've eaten your meal, and you want to bring Kedusha into the meal. You want to bring an element of Kedusha. So by saying this capital Tilim, so you're bringing the light of Torah to the meal. So they say the saying the Mizmer HaMenorah is like bringing the light of Torah, the light of Kedusha, to your meal. So then you ask why on the Shabbos, on the Yom Tov, you don't need it. Possibly when it's a Sudas Mitzvah, like a Shabbos and a Yom Tov, so it's already a Sudas Mitzvah. So it's already kind of got the light of Kedusha on it. And therefore, it's not necessary to say this capital Tilim. But when it comes to a regular weekday meal, so we say this chapter of Tilim to bring as if the light of Torah, the light of Kedusha, to enhance and elevate the meal which we're eating. As I say, if someone has a better, a clearer explanation, I'm really all ears to hear. Let's go on. The next question on my list here is that someone has a cleaning lady, and the cleaning lady took the wine. There was a bottle of wine in the fridge, which was not mevushal, which wasn't boiled wine, and she handled it. And the question is, can you use it? Can you use it for Kiddush? So now we have a term called Yain Nesech. Yain Nesech means wine which has been consecrated by an act for worship, for Avodah Zarah, for idol worship. And of course, anything which is used for worship becomes Osir Bahanoah, you're not allowed to have benefit from it. If a goy handles wine means he actually swishes his finger in the wine, then he actually makes the wine Osir. But if the goy just picks up the bottle, that on its own would not be enough under normal circumstances to make the wine forbidden. Then there is the next step, and that is where al pi Kabbalah, there is something, if a Nochri sees wine, and by seeing the wine, he causes a pegima, causes a blemish to the wine. This is mentioned in a sefer called Tel Talpios, subsequently brought by the Shalom. And so many people are particular to cover the wine. Wine we're talking about, which is not mevushal. And so some say not to use that wine altogether. Some say just for Kiddush not to use that wine. So there you are, if she handled this bottle of wine and likely saw the wine, so then there would be mokim lechumra, not to use it for Kiddush. But minhadin, strictly speaking, the wine is mutter. I must share with you one of my favorite stories, one of my experiences. I got a call on Erev Rosh Hashanah from a shliach in California. And I don't know whether I've told this story over this program. And the story was that it was about 2 o'clock in the morning in California, and that's why he couldn't get a Rov who would dare to telephone at 2 o'clock in the morning. So he called Europe. So what had happened, he has a Goyish chef who's preparing, and they're preparing, this is about 3-4 years ago, perhaps more, and they were preparing for Rosh Hashanah, expecting about 80 people. And so there's a guy working in the kitchen. And as good cooks do, you add wine to the cooking. It so happened that the bottle of wine which he used was non-mevushal wine. And he'd poured it all over these 80 portions or more of chicken, and he put them all roasting in the oven. And now what does he do? So, big problem. So according to my understanding of the halacha now, at the time I wasn't knowledgeable enough in that, and I had asked someone else who said it was not okay. Having learned the halacha since more carefully, just the mere fact that the guy handled the wine and poured it over the chickens would not be enough to make the chickens asur. But what you may not want to know is that good chefs, when they scatter the wine over the chickens, etc., they will put their finger to give it a bit of a biological taste, and they will put their finger in front of the bottle, in other words, they will touch with their finger every bit of wine which goes over it. If that was the case, then the psak was definitely that the chicken would not be usable. Okay, let's go on to the next fairly simple, straightforward question. Here is Can I just ask, Drazy, do you mind bringing me a cup from the kitchen, please? So the question here is, can you use such a collapsible cup for Kiddush, or for Netilas Yadayim? So the answer is yes. The answer is it's okay. It's acceptable for Netilas Yadayim, and perhaps I want to explain. Thank you very much. So there we are. Now, if you can see the glass in my hand, I'm going to use. If there would be a leak over here in this glass, or it was a cup, then it would not be valid for Netilas Yadayim, and I want to explain why. If this were full of water and I would pour it over, now because it has a leak at this point, the 2 inches or whatever, these 5 centimeters above the hole, they are not called keli because they don't hold water. The water is only from here beneath the hole is called a keli. Now, when I pour the cup from the cup onto my hand, imagine if that part was missing, so that the water wouldn't have reached my hand. So what poured the water onto my hand? A non-keli. Well, Netilas Yadayim is not valid with non-keli. So that's the reason why a leak in a keli will invalidate the keli, because when you pour, so if the leak were very near the top and the water would have reached my hand regardless, then it would still be kosher. But if the leak is lower down, then it indeed would invalidate it for Netilas Yadayim. So I asked the person who sent me this beautiful picture, when you pull it out as it is in the picture, does it leak from the seams? And he says it doesn't. Says, and that's the case, then that's okay to use for Netilas Yadayim. Actually, about 40-something years ago, I asked this very same question to Reb Zalman Shimon, who was the Dvorkin, who was the Rav in 770. He says he understand. He didn't have the picture, but he understood what I was asking. He says it's okay. So someone's asking, can you pour from the side without the hole? So the answer is no, you cannot. If you have a hole over here, then whether you pour from this side or from the other side, it makes no difference. Anything above this is considered not a keli. And therefore, it doesn't matter which side you pour from. Above this is not a keli, and unless you turn it in such a steep angle, or it's near the top where the water would have reached your hand regardless. Let's move on to the next question. Okay, so here we have a group of Yiddish girls, and they are going for some kind of trip in Europe somewhere, and they are 6 girls, and they have a non-Jewish driver. This is somewhere in Eastern Europe. And they are asking, what do they do about Yichud? So let's go through a principle in Yichud. We know that Yichud means a woman being secluded with a man other than her husband, etc. is forbidden midrabona, midaraisa, midrabona, depends on what the conditions are. Then we have here's not one woman; it's 6 young ladies. But there's a difference between if the man is a kosher or the man is a porus. If the man is a kosher person, so then if it's 2, 3 women, if it's 3 women, sorry, 2 women is still a issue of Yichud, but with 3 women, it would be okay. But here's the kosher man, he's considered a porus. Therefore, it does raise a problem. Now, very often people ask the question about Yichud with taxis, etc. Where there's one of the deterrents which we can reuse in the dinim of Yichud is Pesach Pasuach L'Shos Rabim. If what's going on, if there's access from the street, or if there's visibility from the street. These are 2 forms of Pesach Pasuach L'Shos Rabim. Very often people call me, I'm stuck at home and there's someone in the house. One of the solutions which I have is if they are on the ground floor and they can open the curtains that they can be visible from the street, it takes away the shel of Yichud. Similarly, if there's a car which is driving in a built-up area, or even where there's a lot of traffic, every couple of minutes another car passing, and the windows are not tinted, so then also that's called Pesach Pasuach L'Shos Rabim. It's visible from the street, one can be mekel. But here they're talking about driving in somewhere in Eastern Europe, and it's talking about driving country lanes, quiet places, which is a different story. And therefore, it does raise a question of Yichud. So what I've got over here in front of you is a quote from the Sefer Nite Gavriel, who's written one of his many very good Sforim. So he has here a quote: Bote Sefer, schools which are making tiyulim, which excursions, outings for the Talmidos to travel for long journeys out of town. They should be careful not to travel in a way that there's an issue of Yichud, even if there's meyo noshim, unless there would be another man who's a kosher with, in addition to the driver, menayel or mechanech. And the fact that they're traveling during the day, but they'll come late at night, that's not okay. If so he has here another eitzah. But the overall, it does raise a problem. And here in his footnotes, he writes, also, if a person who has got no reason for, got no restraint built in his system, so then even with Meir Noshim, that would raise a problem. And so, yeah, so this does raise a problem of Yichud, and so no easy heter for them. Right. Someone is asking, did I say a collapsible cup cannot be used for Kiddush? No, the answer is it's a keli, it's valid for Kiddush, and it's valid also for Netilas Yadayim. It's both basically the same halacha. Since it's able to retain the liquid, it doesn't leak, then it's valid for Netilas Yadayim and for Kiddush. Let's move on to the next question. Glasses, lenses. So someone asks me the following. It looks like this fellow is learning Hilchos Muktzah very thoroughly. And is asking the question, if lenses fall out of the glasses frame on Shabbos, are they Muktzah? So the background to this question is, here you have a halacha in Shulchan Aruch, talks about a bench where one of the legs has been dislodged. So you wouldn't be allowed to move it, etc. The reason which we have over here is, so here we have earlier about an oven, where there is a concern that the person may forget for a moment that it's Shabbos, and they'll put back the leg and fit it tight. So you can, let's say a bench has got legs, you can put them in loose. That would not be a violation of Shabbos. But by putting it in, screwing it tight, taking components and putting them together is a issur of boina, is construction. So whenever there is a concern that you might put it back and tighten it, that raises a question of boina. Now, the second quote is from Simon Shin Yud Gimel, also in the Dinim of Muktzah. Talks here about a door which has got some kind of bar which is jutting up into the upper of the door frame and into the bottom of the door frame. Talks about putting it back, which you wouldn't be allowed to. Then he talks about in Sif Tezvov, what about if you have a kind of, I don't really have the picture clearly in my mind, a door frame which the bar is not at the top of the door nor the bottom of the door, it's in the middle. And I don't understand the picture exactly. And therefore, there's not really such a concern of Yishema Yitka. There's not really a concern that you might come to fix it tight, because that's not the way it's done. And still, he says, you wouldn't be allowed to put it back in place. So here we have, even where in a door where there isn't in this door a concern that you might come to tighten it, but since it's similar to another type of door, where tightening would be applicable, so you wouldn't be allowed to put it back on Shabbos. On Yom Tov, this is different. Yom Tov is a bit more lenient, and on Yom Tov, you are allowed to this idea. So I actually got caught out on this once. Someone asked me, if the lenses come out on Yom Tov, are you allowed to put them back in loosely? And I said, off the cuff, I said, it's not allowed to. You're not allowed to. It's a chashash. You might. And he showed me the halacha is no. That this idea that you might come to tighten it is applied on Shabbos, and Yom Tov, the halachas are obviously more lenient, and therefore this idea of putting it back the lens in case you're not allowed to tighten it, but to put it back loose in case you're tighten, that is permitted on Yom Tov. So that's what we have over here. And then we have here on the left side of your screen, we have here from the Shmiras Shabbos Kehilchosa. So he's talking about adasha, which means a lens. Those who like etymology might know that the word lens and lentil come from the same word, and that's why the modern Hebrew word for a lens is adasha. Is because I've got the same that originally the lenses, if you remember the old goggles, so they used to be the same shape as lentils. That's really relevant to, what was it, last week, Cedra, or 2 weeks ago? Okay, so here we have a lens which has fallen out of the glasses frame. You're not allowed to put it back where there's a chashash, where there's a concern. Because there's a concern, you might come to fix it. You're not allowed to straighten the bars on the strides on the sides of the glasses. And he has this word epunim. I don't know eponym. I don't speak that part of Hebrew. So you wouldn't be allowed to straighten a pair of glasses. If the
Aponym, I
yes?
think, is the thing that hold to the aft. The little
oh, very good, very good. Okay, the bits which hold it on the nose. Aponym, very good. Okay, thank you for that piece of etymology. Good. And then he says you're not allowed to tighten any parts. There seems to be a little bit further. There's a difference between plastic lenses, plastic glasses frames, and metal glasses frames. Metal glasses frames, you use screws, and therefore there's more there. The chashash, the concern of tightening it, does apply, and therefore if your glasses falls out of your metal frames, that would become Muktzah. It would be, you're not allowed to put it back. It becomes Muktzah. The frame becomes Muktzah, etc. By contrast, if it's a plastic frame and it's already a bit loose from before Shabbos and it pops out, and you're not going, there's no screwing, then there's room to be a bit more lenient. I'm just reading the last paragraph in the Shmiras Shabbos Kehilchosa. If it's a lens which often falls out, you don't need to have might and strength to put it back in place. Then you would be allowed to put it back on Shabbos. So yeah, so I would differentiate between where there is a screw which could be tightened, and that makes more of a problem, and when it's there's nothing to screw, then it's less of a question. Let's go now to some of the chats. Some people are putting some questions on this. He says Nochris Echad. He says in a female about the Yichud. Perhaps because she is Shomer. I'm not sure exactly what his reason is. Right. If the lens is Muktzah, can be held in one's hand to read through? I don't think so. In other words, once it's subject to this chashash that you might come to tighten it, then it becomes Muktzah. And they say not only does the lens become Muktzah, the whole frame becomes Muktzah, and that's what you can see over here. Unless you've used it already in its incomplete form before Shabbos, then you don't have to worry about it. But if you haven't used it, then the whole thing becomes Muktzah, as well as you can't use it and it becomes Muktzah. Right. Let's move on. So the next thing which I have on my list here is, before we get to the one which is on the screen, does footwear called Uggs, if I pronounce it rightly, or Uggs, however, it's a popular brand, and the question is it a problem for Muktzah? For Shatnez. So Shatnez, as we know, is a combination of wool and linen, and sometimes these Uggs they are like fleecy on the inside, which is obviously made of wool, and often there are parts of it. Sometimes there's an upper which is made of linen, and it does keep the foot warm, and therefore, without going into a list of which Uggs are Shatnez, which are not Shatnez, if you are buying these Uggs, you should take it to someone who's an expert in Shatnez laboratory, and have them checked before using them. Let's now go on to someone asks me the following question. A Bible printed by Notzrim. I'm just a little bit conscientious which words I use over here. So is asking, there's a well-known concept in Halocho, Sefer Torah shekosvei min yesoref. Sefer Torah written by a heretic should be burnt. So now, if this question was, someone was clearing out a house, and there was some Sforim there. Unfortunately, they also found a Bible printed by Goyim, and you can understand there was the two parts to it. And the first part is the Tanakh, and he's asking what should he do with it. So here we have a tshuva from the Shevet Halevi. He talks about this, and it actually might be a bit surprising, but he says the following: when you're not allowed to disgrace Hashem's name, and when you have a sefer which has Hashem's name there, you're not allowed to disgrace it. When a heretic wrote it, then when he wrote that name, he had in mind Avodah Zarah. He had in mind something which was not unholy, which was not holy at all. Okay, then you can burn it. Says Rav Wosner, he says, but the machine which printed, the machine doesn't have kavanah. It's like the flip side of the machine matzahs. The machine matzahs, we have a question about kavanah. Yeah, it's lishma. So here it works to the benefit in a way. Call it benefit, whatever you want. The point is that the machine doesn't have kavanah. You can't say that this shame, this name of Hashem, Yud Kevavke, or whatever it was, is written l'shem avodah zarah. It wasn't written l'shem anything. It's almost like it happened by itself. It was a groma, someone pressed a button. So it doesn't have a wrong kavanah. On that basis, Rav Wosner paskins that you're not allowed to burn it. So that's an interesting Kiddush, but that's his psak, that you wouldn't be allowed to burn it. So what I tell people is, if they pick up one of these things, they should wrap it up in a bag and put it to get in the shamers. But because you don't want the shamers don't have to suffer by being in company of these other unsavory texts. So therefore, wrap it up in a bag out of covered for the other sforim, but it has to be put in the geniza. You can't be burnt. Okay, so that's the tshuva in Shevet Halevi. Let's move on.
So we don't really have today a scenario of a Sefer Torah shekosvei min anymore.
Unless it's handwritten. Unless it's handwritten, yeah. So I grace the Chiddush, because I remember as a kid, I remember seeing we had an assembly, and the teacher took a new testicle and reingelegt and put a fire, and it was a whole sreifa shel mitzvah. Yeah, but if it's just the second part, if we call it the second part, then yeah, there's no problem to burn it. But if it's got a Tanakh with it, then we have a problem. Sorry?
I'm not sure if my memory is failing me, but I seem to remember your Shvera Lova Sholem burning one in the back of Beis Lubavitch.
Okay, there we are. So it may have been just the second part, without the first part.
No, it was definitely.
Okay.
Definitely, if it was definitely because it was a chumash. It wasn't. I don't think it even had the second part.
All right. So that was obviously
a missionary chumash.
Obviously, he wasn't aware of Rav Wosner's psak. Yeah. Okay, if he would, I mean, probably would have taken into consideration. Okay, let's move on. So someone's asked me now about the minhag Chabad to use for Kiddush, to use wine rather than grape juice. What's the reason for this? So before we go further, someone's asking, can this book be put in recycling? I would say no, it actually should be put in Geniza, because the shame was not written shel lishmo, so it has Kedusha to it. Right, it's Kedusha, it's Shchinta Begolus. Let's come back to our question over here. The wine, so here we have, this is from the Siman Ein Reish Beis, talking about the wine for Kiddush. And I have here Mikol Mokai Mitzvah Min HaMuvcher Livrei Yain HaMeshubach B'Yoseh L'Kadosh Olav. It talks about different qualities of wine. Mitzvah, ideal to use the choice wine to make Kiddush. We know Chassidim are very aware, and in Tovshin Lamed Ches, when the Rebbe had a heart attack, and it was his night of Shmini Atzeres, and he was they wanted him to have something to eat or something to drink, and he says you have to make Kiddush. So after a heart attack, they thought that it might be an idea that instead of having wine, he should have grape juice. I'm not a doctor, but maybe I don't know the difference, what it makes a difference to a heart patient. But Lepoil, the Rebbe, is quoted as having said then, Kiddush mach min wine. He insisted on making Kiddush on wine, and so generally Chassidim are particular Chassidishe Chabad, which is interesting because most other Kreisen, as far as I understand, and what I've seen written down, are quite easygoing to use grape juice for Kiddush. My father, Olav Sholem, once asked Reb Zalman Shimon, from my mother's side, he asked Reb Zalman Shimon about making Kiddush and grape juice, and he said it's a good to have Tzutzugissen. There's an union of diluting the wine with a bit of water. And so, but I don't think Reb Zalman Shimon was saying that in full seriousness. He was probably saying more in a Chassidishe way. Use proper wine, and you dilute it with a bit of grape juice, which I always do, Taka, just to make it a bit more pleasant. Because certainly in the situations where people cannot handle a proper wine, so then of course we would say that they can make Kiddush or Havdalah on grape juice. But although it says in the Gemara, it says Soichet Adam Eshkel Mekadesh Aleha. A person can squeeze, obviously before Shabbos, can squeeze a cluster of grapes, and he can use it for Kiddush right away. But there, it's got the potential that it could what's it called? No, I've forgotten the word. It could mature. Ferment. Thank you. And it can become into wine. Whereas the grape juice, the reason why it is grape juice is that they've actually pasteurized it and cooked it to stop the fermentation, so it doesn't have a chance to become wine. All right, you can pick holes in that approach, but the point is that's why instead of going through that approach, I'm just showing the halacha that there's a mitzvah min hamuvcher to use yain hamashubach. Therefore, there is a preference by Chassidishe Chabad at least to use a taka wine for Kiddush. Or a combination of wine with grape juice. Okay, let me go to the questions over here. Someone's asking, what about Havdalah? Is it wine as opposed to beer, or as opposed to grape juice? Also by Havdalah, one should, unless you have a particular health issue, but even for Havdalah, you should also be using wine. As again, you can have, let's say, if you have a problem of handling so much wine, Muktzah Shabbos, you have still work to do. So you combine a bit of grape juice. Okay, have it 3/4 of grape juice and 1/4 wine, but it should be using wine also. Someone is writing here the story of the Rebbe telling someone who a mop handle damaged his eye to use wine for Kiddush and it cured him. Okay, yeah, right. Then Mendel is asking, what about the wine which is 3.5%? Is that called yain meshubach? The answer is yes. Meshubach, I don't know. Is it yain? Yes. Yain meshubach is. I'm sure there's better wines than that. It's fascinating. If you want to read up, why did they draw the line at 3.5% alcohol to be the shear for how much alcohol should be the minimum to be wine? If you get hold of the book on Pesach from Rabbi Blumenkrantz, he has the whole fascinating explanation of the how much it can be the maximum wine, the alcohol content of wine, and then he compares that. Then he says, then you're allowed to dilute wine by 1/6. On that basis, he comes to the. So, all right, you're saying Nachman says 6%, but all right, Blumenkrantz says something like 4% or 3.5% is good enough. Okay, fine. Laten we gaan weiter. Rabbi Yonason, if you can just tell us, where does Rav Nachman say this? Is this in his Shluchim Sefer?
No, I heard it from directly.
Okay, this is Nachmussen from Chavot.
Cholot, yeah.
Okay, fine. All right. Can you mute yourself now? Yeah, because yeah, thank you. I've got shkoyach. Okay, then I think it was the same fellow was asking me. Many Polish Yidden are particular to add a little bit of water to the wine at Kiddush, etc. And is asking me what's the reason for it and why in Chabad is this not done. So the dinim of Kesher bracha are actually in the dinim of Birchas Hamazon. It's interesting. People think Kesher bracha is from Havdalah. The primary Kesher bracha is the Kesher of benching. And the dinim that says there's 10 dinim, 10 characteristics for the Kesher bracha. And one is chai, and it says here, and how it should be neat. The wine should be neat. And then when it comes to Birchas Ha'oretz, you'll add a little bit of water to it. As a mitzvah min hamuvcher, that the wine should be diluted, should be more pleasant. So this is the background. Then he says, im yayin chazok, im ein yayin chazok, shehu orev beloy meziga ein sorch lemeizge klal. The wine is a strong wine; it doesn't need to be diluted. Leave it as is. However, there are those who have a particular pikabola always to add a bit of water to wine, and that's got to do with hamtokas hakvuris, etc. So that's the background to the Polish minhag of always adding a bit of water to the wine for Kiddush, etc. They have a little drop and they add it always to the wine. Because of this thing of al pikabola, which is interesting. Then in Chabad Bichlal we are conscientious about stuff al pikabola. So why is it in Chabad we're not so particular about this? I haven't seen it being done regularly. And so now we have there was a quote from Siman Kuf Pei Beis. The lower quote is from Siman Ayin Reish Beis, the dinim of Kiddush on ala yayin. And so here we have yayin chai afilu. Then he says v'yenes shelonu she'enum chazokim hem yoyse toivim beloy meziga. So here the Alter Rebbe writes that our wines are better undiluted. So possibly that's where the Chabad minhag comes from. Don't bother with it without adding water. So now what you have here on the left of the page of the screen is a quote from there's a sefer called Kitzur Halochos. It's a turquoise sefer put out by Ole Shem, by Rabbi Horowitz and Rabbi Alashvili. Excellent sefer. And he's being medayik from the words Yoshe Tovim below meziga, not just you don't need to, but Yoshe Tovim. Therefore, there's a preference not to be mozik, especially. And then he says some of the better quality wines do not add water, but on the other hand, there are those who do actually add already a lot of water. So therefore, when in doubt, that's what I've seen in minhag Chabad. We're not particular about this, and possibly because of this loshon is Yoshe Tovim below meziga. I see here there's a note here. Rabbi Reuven Cohen's writing. Dayan Refson explained that as wine we buy is diluted to its maximum already, but maybe the grape juice actually officially is not diluted, but the wine you are probably right. My Zaydo Alav Shalom lived in Rishon LeZion, and he was friendly with the people at the Carmel winery. And when I was a bocher learning in Eretz Yisrael, he called me one time, to come to help him make the wine, and he had about 3 or 6 crates of grapes, and he plucked them and put them in the tubs. And after 3 weeks, I think he added sugar. After 3 weeks, it came out a wine which was like a syrup, very, very thick wine. So he siphoned off the first wine. Then he added water again onto the lees. He added a similar amount of water. And another 3 weeks later, or whatever, 6 weeks later, and it came out, and it was also just the same alcohol content as the first lot, but it was more, it was thinner, more runny. Then they did it a third time, and this time it came out clear. It looked like a vodka, but it also had the same alcohol content. So he had used the same grapes to create 3 lots of wine, and then he blended the 3 groups of wine, the 3 batches together, and then that was the wine which he used. So he obviously did add a lot of water to it. I'm not sure now at this moment what the halacha is about that, because it was not water added to wine, it was water which was fermented into wine, but let's leave that. But just you're right that some wines they come already diluted, and therefore there's a limit of how much you can dilute. Again, if you look at the Kedem advertisements close to Pesach, they will tell you, and also in Blumenkranz's book, it's there at the back, in the inside back page, they will tell you what proportion of water is added to the wine, and therefore how much you can dilute it with water. So it's going to vary, and which wine you're using. Let's move on. Okay. Question. When we talk about Sheva Brachas, so how do you count the 7 days of celebration? And so what we have over here, this is on the page of the Shulchan Aruch Even HaEzer, Siman Samach Beis. And sorry, no, it's Arachaim Kuf Lamed Aleph, the Dinim of Tachnun. And here's a question: how do you calculate the 7 days for of a chasana? And the question is then, if a chassan got married on Tuesday afternoon, and he comes to shul next Tuesday morning, yes tachnun or no tachnun? I heard that the late Rav Hutner said, if the Umas Olam would know the geschmack of missing a tachnun on a Montag and Donnerstag, want ze gelof van de megaar given. So so here we have a question. It's Tuesday morning. That's not a Montag and Donnerstag, and so that do you say it goes 7 times 24 hours? The 24 hours is called mesles. So some say that it goes according to starts from the first Seudah. Then we have that the Knesset Yechezkel says it doesn't work according to mesles. It works, and if the wedding was on a Tuesday, so already by Monday evening, the celebration is over. But then we have lower down, we have here a quote from a Sefer Machzik Brocha, that's from the Chidah, who quotes from the Sefer Ginos V'Radim. And he says, no, it works 7 full days. It's 7 times 24 hours. And therefore, he says, even let's say, if the chasna last week was late afternoon, and now it's mincha early afternoon, you could still, you would not say tachnun. And so we have here 2 opinions, and the general consensus is that when it comes to brochas, and you're going to a shaila of brocha levatala, so then you would, if again the chuppah was on Tuesday afternoon, the general consensus is that the last Sheva brachas would be on Monday till Shkia. As far as Tachnun goes, we would take the more lenient position, and he quotes here from, I think it's Beshua Molchoi, the last couple of lines, the im yesh sofik. If you have a sofik, yes tachnun, no tachnun, so then you don't say tachnun. When there's a genuine sofik, whether to say tachnun or not, so you miss out tachnun. Therefore, the hachroa, when it comes to tachnun, is to work out 7 times 24 hours from the chuppah. When it comes to Sheva Brochas, making brochas, the general, as I said, the general consensus seems to be that you'd call it the end of the celebration by Monday sunset. Having said that, I've been told this past week that the late Rav Ashkenazi, quoting also the previous Rav of Chabad, Reb Shneir, they would rely on the 7 mesles also for Sheva Brachas too. But as I say, that's not the what I'm sure most of us have been brought up with. We don't go for that. So, okay, there is such a thing. Okay, I'm just seeing here a couple of questions on the chat. how about what Chassanim are often told? As long as you treat your wife as a malka, you are a melech. Thank you very much. Yeah, good idea. Right, and then what about Shmiras Chosim V'Kala? Probably would go. You'd take the stricter view until. And also, the biggest question is, when does he take off his kapota and put on a jacket? Okay, so yeah, Vimiton is good. Okay, I'm going to finish off a little bit earlier than usual. Doorgegaan in the list. Just the shaila is about next week. So next week is Shabbos is Yutas Kislev, and so there's Baruch Hashem for the last 10, 15 years we've had a big event for called Inspire, and lots of shluchim will come with their balabatim. It's a very beautiful and geshmaki event, and that's being called for that's being called. That's because for 7:30. The program is because from 7 o'clock. So I'm just to play on the safe side. Bez Hashem, next week we'll have the shir. I don't want to be mevatel the shir, so the shir will be from 6 to 7 p.m. and the recording, Bez Hashem, will be available shortly thereafter. I just want to finish off with a story. What I like about this Inspire event. Just a couple of minutes. There's someone in Golders Green, actually in Hampstead, by the name of Mr. Seymour Gorman, and his wife Sonia is an artist. And going back in the Lameds, the Rebbe had started launching the Mivtzoyim. At the time, there were six Mivtzoyim, and she made a portrait of the Rebbe, a pencil portrait. But she made the Rebbe in the middle, and she made like pictures of the various Mivtzoyim around the Rebbe, like little pictures, 6 pictures around, and the Rebbe's picture was in the middle, and she made this portrait. And she and her husband came to New York, to the Rebbe, and they, not sure whether it was Yichud, but they wanted to present it to the Rebbe. And they had framed it like a fancy frame. They wanted to present it to the Rebbe. So the first thing the Rebbe said to her, I am pleased the way you picture me. The fact that the Rebbe is surrounded with the Mivtzoyim, the Rebbe liked the way he had been pictured, surrounded by the Mivtzoyim. Then the Rebbe says, but I have a problem with accepting the gift because I don't accept gifts. The picture, I can pass it like a manuscript, and for the library I collect manuscripts, collects for him, so the picture can pass as a manuscript, but the frame I cannot accept the frame, and therefore I want to pay for it. So Seymour Gorman, he didn't need the $100 which the Rebbe was offering him, but he says, Rebbe, it's okay. The Rebbe says, no, but if you refuse to accept payment, I'll have to refuse the picture. So reluctantly they accepted the $100 bill which the Rebbe gave, and when the Rebbe took the picture, accepted it, and then when they got back to England, they looked at the invoice, whatever, for the framing. It worked out the exchange rate. It was almost to the penny, the same as the $100 which the Rebbe had given them for his payment for the picture. Hoter Meister for Muktzah Shabbos, and so I wish you all a gesunte Woche, and celebrate your Dal Kislev and your Tes Kislev and alle gute Sachen. And ja, seid alle gesund, wir müssen uns treffen, Gesundheit. Tomit Kala, es sein Simchas Tomit Kala Yom, a gute Woche.
Thank you very much.
Good luck. Thank you.
Gute Woche.
Thank you. Good luck. Thank you.
A gute Woche.
Gute Woche.
Gute Woche.